Welcome to the last substantive session of today's CogX. Now, I'm very, very conscious that we stand between you and the closing remarks, which means we stand between you and a nice cold drink of your particular disposition. But what we want to do for the last few minutes of today's session is take you out of your comfort zones. Because it can be very tempting, can't it, to think about cybersecurity, the future of cybersecurity, as being what you need to buy in the next 6 months, or what you need to buy in the next year. And I've spent quite a bit of time doing cybersecurity futures exercises. Firstly, at Europol, where we did Project 2020 nearly 10 years ago. And secondly, rerunning that with Trend Micro. And we've got a little bit of feedback, which I think the audience can hear as well. Somebody's speaking over, so if we could get rid of that, that would be brilliant. Thank you. And secondly, working on Project 2030 with Trend Micro. So I've had bitter experience of how to do cybersecurity crystal ball gazing, and quite frankly, how not to do it as well. Now, some of that uncertainty we find is quite often experienced through quotes like this. It is difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. Quite often ascribed to Niels Bohr, the Danish Nobel Prize-winning physicist, but also apocryphally claimed by lots of other people who want to look funny and clever when we think about the future. And I think it's sometimes used as an excuse that because the future is uncertain, we shouldn't bother trying to look into it. And really, the natural and logical progression of that is that we are constantly surprised. It keeps us in that frame of mind where our threat predictions for the next year are always just more ransomware, more business email compromise, more supply chain attacks, more IoT attacks, and that might be perfectly valid, but it means we're not prepared for the unexpected. We're not prepared for those rapid accelerations in technological development, in changes in the operating environments. And we have a couple of examples of that. If I think about Russian disinformation, when they tried to interfere in the US 2016 federal elections, that was dismissed, wasn't it, by one very powerful CEO of a social media company as a crazy idea. But was it? Well, I would argue it was probably quite a logical thing to do. The Russians have been involved in disinformation, desinformация, for quite a long time. And social media is a very, very powerful place to share user-generated content. So it would be a natural place, wouldn't it, to try and influence people's perceptions. So when we're thinking about uncertainty, just because the future is uncertain doesn't mean we shouldn't look into it. And so I would like to replace this quote, disputed to Niels Bohr, with this one, which is entirely undisputed because I wrote it. Uncertainty is no excuse for failing to prepare. Now, I am joined by two very capable and very experienced experts in cybersecurity and practitioners in cybersecurity, both of whom have spent quite a bit of time having to consider changes in the threat landscape. So I'm very pleased to welcome Sian John, Senior Director for Cybersecurity Business Development at Microsoft, and Becky Pinkard, who, quite frankly, I never expected to introduce on a stage simply because we are partners in podcast crime with Cyber Warrior Princess. Becky is currently Global Head of Cyber Defence at Vodafone. And we're going to take you into the next 5 to 10 years of cybersecurity. So really beyond that next thing that you're being asked to buy or the next thing that you're asking your board for. And when we're considering the future of cybersecurity, actually we're thinking about all of these things in the operating environment, and at least all of these things. You'll be able to think of more. This is what I took my brain through when we were doing Project 2030. So looking at space, work, climate, environment, education, all of those different aspects of a society. And then equally, at least all of those technologies. And one of the things that I like to tell people about when we develop these scenarios that are really just stories of a possible future is that none of these technologies develop in a vacuum. You'll see quite a few threat and trend predictions around misuse of AI, misuse of robotics, misuse of 4D printing, additive manufacturing. But of course, these technologies will converge. In the world of 2025, 2030, AI and 5G and 6G will enable acceleration in development of immersive environments like VR and AR. When we're thinking about space technologies, there's an opportunity, isn't there, for 4D printing and IoT to enable items to be shipped into space that can then change shape on receipt of a particular stimulus. And so as soon as we think about these technologies converging, we have these imaginative moments where we can think about what might happen beyond the next 6 months. It becomes more fun, it becomes more compelling, and it gets us thinking about things that we might have already missed, that we haven't already given due attention to, and gives us considerations about those wider changes in the world that can have an impact on how we have to defend networks, systems, and information in the years to come. So I have claimed, very much claimed, usurped even, my privilege of chair to set out my stall and set the scene for our discussion. You'll be relieved to hear I'm going to take a bit more of a back seat now, and I'm going to let Sian and Becky share with you their pearls of wisdom. So firstly, we're going to move to our questions now. Sian, what would you say are your top 3 trends in the next 5 to 10 years for cybersecurity, cyber threats, and what does that mean for organisations?
Yeah, so I similarly to you, although I'm not with Trend, been doing a Cybersecurity 2030 project. I didn't realise that was trademarked, so I have to watch out for that one. And actually, exactly what you were saying when you're looking at cybersecurity trends and the things you need to look at, too often we look at cybersecurity in isolation and don't look at what the wider technology trends are, which is where the threats come from. There's even a whole, and I'm not going to open that can of worms today, but the debate of what is and isn't cybersecurity. I tend to go for the broader definition. Some people go for more narrow. But ultimately, if you look across all these new technological developments like robotics, the metaverse, which I've been to 3 sessions today, yesterday and today, and the more Internet of Things AR, it's all that merging of human and technical and people and computing. And there's some real threats that come with that. So in terms of things to worry about over the next 5 to 10 years, obviously the things we've seen with Ukraine and the use of cyber in war is absolutely that. We've been going on that journey for a few years, but it's definitely those gates are now open. So effectively, we will continue to see more of that nation-state attacks and things like that. There was an interesting point made in the Global Leaders Summit yesterday by Wendy Hall, where she said to look into the metaverse, you need to look at data protection, AI policy, and cybersecurity together. And I think that is one of those big trends, is that actually cybersecurity needs to get outside of looking at itself in terms of threats. We need to look at those socio-economic things that come as well. And really the key bit there is data protection. It's probably one of the oldest and to many people the dullest parts of what we do, but yet the most important. We've failed to get control of data really for the last 20 years. As we go into this metaverse, AI, engineered connected world, getting control of data and particularly personal data will become absolutely important. And then the third one is that we need to really look at the intersection between different technology and how we protect that, and that cyber physical trend. So the sort of very waffly trends that I see, but I think the core is, when it comes to what we need to do, yes, it is more of the same, but we need to expand out of being purely technical into that more mixed, information-centric world. And I think it related to that, obviously there is things like identity and all that stuff that fit in, but we really just need to stop thinking of cybersecurity in isolation and think of it as part of effectively securing the world we live in today.
I'm going to press you a little bit later on some of those thoughts that you just provoked in me, but I'm going to turn to you, Becky. Top 3 trends for the next 5 to 10 years.
Top 3 trends, I change them all the time, so we'll see what comes out of my mouth right now, so let me think. I genuinely believe we're continuing to be more and more driven by software, obviously, right? Everything, software development, DevOps, SecDevOps, DevSecOps, something, Sec and Ops. Yeah, it's all converging, it's all continuing to build and grow. Networking, right? Networking is moving towards software-driven networking. Everything is becoming containerized. Everything is becoming microized, right? Smaller, yet more separate, but together. So I think what we're going to continue to see is a lot of challenge as we continue to grow complexity in the way that we evolve and grow our services and our capabilities. And so that's sort of the first thing, right? I think we're going to continue to see this real drive for software development, and with that, a shift even further into cloud-based capabilities as well. I think that then ties into sort of almost a look backwards, something we can't lose. We're going to have to continue to drive with and take with us. And that's the ability to remember that we've got now this quite shaky foundation that we're sort of doing all this super cool new stuff on. Yeah, does anybody know the phrase tech debt? You ever heard of tech debt? I'm a huge advocate for security
a fan of tech debt, aren't you?
We got security debt as well. And I'm going to tell you right now that security debt is accumulating and the interest is outrageous, people. And it is going to come and bite us in the you-know-what's-it. So we need to really be focused on what we're accumulating, where we're accumulating, and then trying to figure out as we go through this big push towards software, right? How do we dig into that? How do we peel it back, pare it back so that we understand how are these things put together? Where are those security holes? And where are we taking them? How are they growing with us or not? Because if we don't do it, who does it for us? The threat actors, right? So that's sort of the second thing I think we've got to continue to hone in on. And the third one for me is not very sexy, apologies, but I think we're going to see a lot more regulator influence. So we're continuing to see it now. Obviously, in the UK alone, so we've got something called TSR, if anybody's familiar with that. There's a lot more regulation coming down on telcos through TSR and activities that are happening there. There's obviously, GDPR taking us back a few years now, but then we're continuing to see more regulation across industry in other countries as well. So there's still a piecemeal approach to it. Different countries, it's like we're all America. You can tell I'm American, right? It's like we're all America, but all over the world. So all the different states are coming up with all their little laws, and then the United States is like, crap, we got to do something at a federal level, but they never do. That's kind of where the world is right now. There's all these little countries coming up with laws, and we're being driven by regulations. So when you try and operate at a global level as a company, that's hard, people. It's freaking hard. And then you have to figure out, how do we do this in a way that means that we can be global, we can be comprehensive and holistic, but we can still handle your specialist requirements, but still be global, right? So I think we're going to continue to see a lot of challenge there, and it's going to force us to get more creative and more innovative in terms of how we take care of the data and how we come together as we continue to look at all these new and amazing things happening.
So I'm seeing certain synergies between both of what you were talking about. And so, Sian, on your side, you're talking about the need for greater integration of response between data protection, for instance, cyber and information security, compliance functions, risk, etc. And you're talking about that kind of holistic response, but also the pressure of the holistic response from the regulators. It does occur to me that, we've had a certain way of doing things where organizations have a DPO, they have a data protection officer, because that's what GDPR and the Data Protection Act, renewed, told them they had to have. And then a chief information security officer or a CIO. Is there a place in the future organization for a more converged function of perhaps someone who's Chief Information Security Officer and Data Protection Officer?
I've seen it in some organisations where you effectively have a chief risk officer who is looking at information risk, security risk, wider risk. Whether you have different levels of expertise is one thing, and actually having a chief risk officer, and they quite often then have a CISO and a sort of an information CISO, as in where CISO started, and then effectively an IT security person reporting to them. I actually think it doesn't matter how the organisation works, because you do have different levels of expertise. But as an organisation, if you're looking to do something, you need to think about things in the round. Think about your tech debt. Think about what it is you're trying to do new. Think about actually the data protection. It's one of those things you see where there's a conversation from certain parts of business that says, let's go do all this new cool stuff, and then let's leave all that. I just realised I was about to say something rude. Legacy old stuff. I was going to say a different word. Legacy old stuff with IT, and let them worry about that. And you have statements like, well, we don't have the budget to update this app, so therefore you've got to keep supporting this app, but we want to do all this new cool stuff. But to keep supporting this app, you've maybe got to keep Windows Server 2003 running in the environment and legacy protocols, and that's a lot of risk. And so to save £20,000 on this app, the company's spending £250,000 managing legacy. That's not the only reason you keep legacy. There's plenty of reasons why. But it's about holistic decision making, even if you have pockets of expertise. And I absolutely agree with Becky about the fact that legacy isn't going away in 10 years' time. There's somebody at Microsoft once said, if there's a nuclear holocaust, there'll be two things that survive: cockroaches and 32-bit apps. So literally, there's certain things that are not going to go away because people need them, or it's stuck in a corner, and you have to manage it. But what we need to do is maybe evolve the way that we manage it. So exactly to that software-defined secure DevOps, the biggest thing I see is 20 to 30-year-old cybersecurity architectures being applied, and it's people expecting it to work. So effectively, I'm going into a cloud-based integrated infrastructure. Where do I put my VPN? And where do I put my legacy stuff? So I think I'm agreeing with Becky in different ways. I think but at the same time, when we do data protection, we try and do it in that old-fashioned, let's encrypt it all or do data loss prevention. We need to move much more towards an information governance, information protection approach, which is why I'm sort of a fan of the GDPR, even though it's got its drawbacks, is it doesn't have a checklist. It has a risk-based, privacy by design, security by design approach, and it's that when I'm a business thinking about doing something new, I need to think about the cybersecurity threat and the legacy threat and everything that's going on, as well as the new stuff I want to do.
It's security by design as an aspiration rather than a reality, isn't it? And it's a great phrase, and we hear it all the time. But when you're dealing with legacy systems, there's only so far you can go with that. You can do security by design for the new stuff. So thinking about the new stuff, Beck, what would you say are the biggest uncertainties of the next few years, and how should organisations mitigate against them?
Again, it's nothing that's very sexy, right? I mean, I think we've got to continue to do basics. And I'm not going to bore you guys by saying what the basics are. Hopefully you all know them, or otherwise you're probably in the wrong chat and otherwise bored already anyway. So we've got to continue with a focus on the basics. And then I think on top of that, we have to continue to actually train our folks who are in school. So there are programs right now happening in elementary schools, primary schools, we call it here, and they need to continue that trend. And again, not just here, obviously, but around the world, so that kids are growing up with this stuff. They understand that, and then they bring those ideas and those ways of working. They're already part of them. They don't have to learn them. Right? Whenever I came into the job force, I'm not going to give away my age, but it's older. And whenever I came into the job force, I had to learn all of that stuff. Right? Cybersecurity wasn't even a thing. Information security was the thing. We used to call it cyber, and that was a dirty word, right? And then it became a good word. So now it's a good word. But we had to learn all of that. And the thing is, if we can get our kids learning that, in combination with doing the right things, and then help our leaders, so the people in business, and they've come a long way. Man, executives in business have come a long way. You can have really amazing conversations with key senior executives, C-suite people now in organizations that, I kid you not, guys, 10 years ago, I was definitely not having. They're interested now, they care, they get it, they understand how it impacts the bottom line, and they understand how it then impacts the health and overall continuity and capability of their company and their services. So I think if we can sort of bring all of that together as we continue to plow forward, that's what is necessary for us to potentially, finally, be able to do security in a timely fashion. So what I'm really hopeful for is by 2030, we're doing security in a timely fashion. Because I got to be honest, right now, in my professional opinion, we're still not doing security in a timely fashion. We're still behind the speed of the threat, to sort of regurgitate an old phrase. And I'd definitely like to be at least even with the speed of the threat, preferably get to a point, where we have some understanding of what's coming down the pipeline before we actually get smacked with it.
We're old, aren't we, you and I? And when you
I'm
got
actually
me,
older than you, Vicky.
I know we can, if you like, we can have a contest, can't we?
Yeah,
About
who's
who's
the
the oldest? With middle-aged women who aren't sensitive about their age. Who'd have thought it?
But we need a fan up here. What the heck?
Yeah, we could do with a fan, actually.
Jesus.
It's quite, yes. It's almost like we've got 3 radiators on stage, isn't it? So if we're looking back to kind of the history of cybercrime investigation, when I first started out, 20 years back, we called it computer crime. And seriously, there were people I was dealing with who thought that was, people just kind of breaking in, picking up a computer and walking off with it. And then it became high-tech crime, which kind of it was kind of like a midpoint to cyber there, wasn't it?
I think that's what made me want to join.
That's when people steal trainers, I think.
But in the early days of cyber, they put cyber in front of everything, like cyber loafing, which is where you sit on your computer browsing the internet. I just call that slacking off, but apparently it's cyber loafing.
Not now we've got the newfangled productivity tools, right? Yeah. But you raise a really important point, which is the board level of interest around cyber and information security and threats to information and data and networks. And I think one of the things that we learned between doing Project 2020 and Project 2030, in 2020, you could do environmental scanning where you said, right, we're going to look at all of the open source information about cyber threats. We're going to look at all of the patents, and we're going to look at all of the scientific abstracts. And I had a team of 7 to 9 people, and we all just sat in a room and wrote on Post-it notes and put it all on the wall and thought, oh, we could study how bees might influence integrated transport systems. And, and it was super cool. When I came to 2019, 2020, and I wanted to do Project 2030, and I thought, right, I'll use the same methodology. We'll look at open source information. We'll look at patents. We'll look at abstracts. Guess how many patents? It's better, isn't it?
Yeah, but I do feel sorry.
You might need that, sorry. Guess how many patents there were for artificial intelligence in the World Intellectual Property
3.
Database?
I'm going to say 3.
Oh, you're not getting a beer later. No.
Just made it up.
There were millions, absolutely millions. Now, if you look at intellectual property, you look at patents around cybersecurity, there are millions of these things to go to. And the reason I mention that is that we've now got information overload when it comes to cybersecurity. All the trend and threat reports, all the news sources, people like us tweeting constantly about stuff you should be worried about, patents, scientific abstracts. And so now we're kind of humanly incapable of following all of this stuff manually. It can be really, really challenging. And so that takes me on to our final scheduled question, which is, how do organisations stay ahead of this evolution in threats and the operating environment? Any ideas? I'm going to go to you, Sian John.
Oh, well. So, I'm actually going to say that next week is InfoSec, and last week was RSA in the US. And the last few years, if you walk around the exhibition floor, 90% of the organisations there will be creating noise, and 10% will be trying to manage that noise. And that's literally where we've been going for the last 4 or 5 years, because everyone's like, the more intelligence I get, the better I can get to deal with this. Give me more intelligence. And then everyone's go, whoa, too much intelligence. And it's that whole you can't see the wood for the trees. And that's why you've got the automation coming up. You get burnout because people get too many alerts, you get too many false positives, you don't get things you see. It's why you've seen the drive of AI, slap my wrist because people machine learning. Because obviously when we say AI in cybersecurity, we're definitely at the machine learning
There's a lot
end.
of truth talking in this session, have you noticed?
So when you see machine learning, it's actually there to get control of the noise. There's actually value to that because there are so many signals that, to Becky's point of trying to catch up, you need to do. It will never replace the human being for understanding context and insights. And what we need to do is get to the point where you can get that signal. It can be processed in a way that you see, but then as a human being, you can bring your human knowledge to it. And it's why you've seen the whole rise of threat, and now you've got external attack surface monitoring as a new thing that's coming, and continuous controls monitoring, and that's all about, it's really hard to keep, when you're going DevSecOps, DevOps, secure DevOps, whatever it is, integrated, but also real-time development and real-time attacking, the old ways of the way that we used to do it, you don't have time for a human being to look at it and respond to it because by that time it's in. That's why actually driving automation to augment the human being is important. It's also why zero trust has become such a big concept and everyone hates it because it's become such a big concept that everyone says, buy my product and I will give you zero trust. You cannot buy a product to give you zero trust. But those principles of explicitly, and none of them are new, to be fair, explicitly verify, least privilege access and assume compromise. None of them new, but actually putting those together and taking that as an approach to design the environment, that gives you a chance to try and limit the blast radius. And there's been more than one occasion where things have got into my company and we're on record of the reason it didn't get any further is because that's the way we've architected our environment. And it's an architectural principle that you can use products to achieve. But when you go to InfoSec next week, if you do, and they're all saying, buy my product for zero trust, don't believe them, you can use them towards that. But that to me that's why it's that whole try and prevent and protect as much as possible and then get more intelligence around responding and bubbling up what's needed.
And I think your focus on zero trust as being old wine in new bottles, perhaps, that chimes very nicely with what you were getting at the top of the session. And this is where I'm going to vastly misrepresent you, but I think what you were going towards was the everything on the edge, everything in the cloud model, which again aligns with some of the SASE, secure access service edge stuff that's being touted at the moment. So the idea that everything is beyond the perimeter now in that respect. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on how organisations stay ahead of the evolving threat landscape.
So yes, the evolving threat landscape. Oh, don't we love to hear those words? It is evolving, constantly evolving. I like to tell everybody that's why we have job security. So if you're in cybersecurity, pat yourself on the back. You've chosen well, job for life. Good job, you. The evolving threat landscape. Whenever I talk about that now, the things that I always like to focus on is, first of all, yes, you mentioned threat intelligence, right? So what is it that feeds it? What is it that gives us the information, gives us the insight? There is too much of it. There's an overabundance of threat intel information. The difficulty that I see right now, and whenever we look at how do we use that to help inform where we're going and how we use that to help understand that evolving threat landscape is, and actually Kevin Beaumont tweeted about this a couple of weeks ago now. So he said, almost verbatim actually, he said that whenever we look at threat intel right now, he said, what I realized is I don't actually want threat intel. What I want is threat context and response. And I was just like, light bulb. He's so spot on. That's why he's got like 100,000 followers and I have like 4. But so whenever he said that, right, it's exactly the light bulb went off for me. The difficulty that we have is we have this overabundance of information, but what we're desperate for is the ability to translate first of all, collate it, make sense of it, pop the necessary lovely cherries off the top, right, so that they make sense for us, and then put it into that context for our companies so that our companies can respond effectively and in a timely fashion. And right now, how do we do that? We dump it into a tip. What's a tip? Nobody freaking knows. I'm going to tell you that right now. If you work for a tip company, I'm sorry, nobody knows what your product is. So the reason that nobody knows is because it goes into a tip. Gosh, I'm really getting bad here. I'm going to hand back to you at Microsoft.
Oh, no, it's all right. I'm actually going to say that's really, because there's another thing that... And it's
I
something
was just letting you go.
I know,
Sorry.
I gotta stop
it's
myself.
actually something that I rant about quite a bit, actually, is that we need to get this intelligence and this insight. But at the time where the big data world and the analytics world has gone, we need to be more green, and we need to pick what we need, and we need to refine it, and we need to work out intelligently what's the data we need that can give us the context we need and make a choice. In cybersecurity, we're just going, dump it all in one big place. I might need it later. That then creates a lot of needles that we've got to search through.
Yeah.
And actually, I think we're not being very green because we keep it all in hot storage that costs a lot of money, both money-wise, but also ecologically-wise. When you actually look at, in the actual big data analytics world, they've got into refine what you need, age things off, put it onto cold storage. And I've gone on about this for a few years, actually. It's when people used to say to me, can we get all the feed of all the data out of Office 365? And I'm like, yes. And if you've got an on-premise information event manager, security incident event manager, you might last an hour, maybe two, before it crashes you. Since then, we've gone into giving APIs and using our cloud-based Sentinel. But the actual reality is you don't want all the Office events. What you want to know is what did it find and what are the security events and how do I correlate it? And we need to get... That's probably the thing I missed out of my 3 trends that I really want us to do for the next 10 years.
You can't have 4.
I know, but we need to get smarter at doing intelligence. Really.
Yeah. Where I was going before I went off on a rant, and I stopped myself by diverging to Microsoft.
And set me off with a rant, sorry.
I was actually headed down that path. What I think we need to do is we need to take all the TI information that we're dumping into tips. Sorry, tips, I do love you at the end of the day. We can make you more effective. But what we need to do is we need to make the information work for us. And that means figuring out how do we take advantage of the machine learning capability that's out there. Right now, for example, there are analysts, I promise you, sitting in probably almost every company around the world doing manual stupid stuff like copy pasting things from one ticketing system into another, right? They'll be opening and generating emails from this team to that team who is based in that local market for them to send on to their team so they can action it and get it taken care of. Man, that's a waste of time. You know, I could honestly probably train a chimpanzee to do some of that stuff. No offense to chimpanzees. But what we need to do is take advantage of the capabilities that we have and have them integrated in a means that is efficient, that's, I can't say cost affordable because we know that doesn't exist, but somehow that we can magically pay for, and then be able to deploy in a meaningful way that doesn't take us a transformation path of 10 years, right? Every company I've ever worked at has a transformation program that's still transforming when I leave, and I go to the next company who's also transforming. And then I, no offense, leave that company as well, and then the next company's transforming. So I literally have in my LinkedIn bio, transformation expert, because that's all I've ever done my whole career. I think that's all we're ever going to do is just transform and then eventually die.
It strikes me, we've got an opportunity, haven't we, to remind ourselves in the industry of the principles of good intelligence analysis. You know, intelligence is information with added value, not just crunching a load of stuff. And I mean, I'm reminded of one of my mentors in law enforcement. I was training to be an intelligence analyst. And he said to me, what you need to do, Vic, is you need to tell me something I don't know and tell me something I can use. So the threat intelligence industry, as much as it is providing lots of really valuable information on people who are talking about you on the dark web, et cetera, you know, and some of that signals-based intelligence as well, is actually giving people something, you use the word meaningful, something that is meaningful and something that they can use now. Enough from you two for a minute, thank you. We've got 10 minutes left of this session, so I'm going to open up for questions from the floor if we have any. Yes, at the front there.
She's like, where's my fan?
I think if you just wait a second, for the mic, yeah. We'll give it back to you if you like.
Hi, hello. So excellent session, lady. Definitely, in my opinion, the best in the last 3 days. I enjoyed it.
That's
thoroughly.
very kind of you, thank you.
So I worked, not now, but previous 3 years, I worked in a company that had a cybersecurity part, was called cybersecurity. And I was leading threat intel, small, tiny group. And I'm a data scientist. That is what is my background. But very quickly I realized that using machine learning to create security feeds that are completely trusted is not something that is obvious. I think it's not actually possible without human intervention, but many companies do believe that machine learning can replace analysts and the army of the analysts. So what is your opinion on that?
I'd like to.
Fantastic question. Yes, go for it, Sian.
So, our position at Microsoft is machine learning is there to augment the human, not replace the human. We have actually, in our Security Operations Centre, done all the things that Becky was complaining about to some extent.
Show off.
The big focus is automating on tier one, and in our CDOC Security Operations Centre, we bring in as many data scientists now as we do cybersecurity experts, because the focus is on how can we build that automation around the use cases where we can, particularly because things happening in Azure, and then if we're talking about responding to events for all our customers across Azure, we can't.
What's Microsoft's security budget?
Yeah, we've got a lot more. Yeah, it's quite hard.
It's not a very nice question.
It's true,
but it's quite hard to divide out our budget from what we do investment in projects, because actually the things that we do then get actually fed back into the things that appear in our security products. So, and it's one of those things where people ask us quite a lot, can you give us threat intelligence? And we haven't done to this point, because our whole focus is on how can we use that to put it into the product to help the product to defend itself. Mm-hmm. And that product being, yes, our security portfolio, but also Azure. So our Microsoft Threat Intelligence team, who focus, Threat Intelligence Centre Mystic, who focus on nation states, they occasionally publish a blog or something like that. They did the Ukrainian sites, but they don't routinely publish you a threat intelligence into a platform, because the reason they're doing that is to monitor the threat, to write protections that go automatically into Azure, into M365 now. It used to be much more Azure, and into the environments, because the whole idea is to automate the defense. But you're right, you cannot replace a human being, but you can look at those points where you can. And our aim now is to try and take the things we've done and simplify that and make it easier for other people to do it without a Microsoft security budget.
And actually, I'll add on to that. So one of the things that we're trying to do right now, and actually actively working towards, is taking anybody who is in a level 1 analyst role, security analyst role within the company, and working to automate all of the jobs that they handle, all of the tasks that they handle, so that I free up their brain, right? I don't want to actually get rid of the human resource. I want to free up the human resource to do awesome stuff with a human brain. So that's the goal that I have right now in the job that I'm currently in.
And that's effectively what we've done. And then what they do is look at how to make that process better.
There's also something I think about machine learning, not AI, but automation not being particularly good yet at identifying what doesn't smell or feel quite right. And some of the brilliant links that human analysts make are when they think to themselves, hang on, I've seen something like that before. Where have I seen that thing 5 years ago in my previous company? So using the humans for what they're best at is also that most human aspect of what they do. That what we undersell by calling it a gut feeling, but is actually deduction based on previous experience.
100%. And I'll tell you what, so I always tell people that I will hire anybody into an entry-level role in a security team if they've got a sense of passion about learning, if they've got a sense of urgency, and if they're not afraid to ask why. I will hire you in a heartbeat. Come and figure out what team appeals to you, right? Where you have to take it from there is you have to be able to apply that knowledge over a period of time to become an expert at what you do. Because it's through those experiences, not through certifications, and I have nothing wrong with certifications. They're amazing. They help to train us up. They help to get us to places. But it's through those experiences and that gut feeling that you look at something, you sit on an incident bridge, and you listen to everything that's happened. You hear all of the evidence come in, and you're like, something ain't right there. And then they dig in a little bit more, and they might figure out ABC, whatever it is. But I cannot tell you how many times in my career, too many years, that has happened time and time again. And it's been those experiences where it's that little niggling thing. And I don't know how you would train that. I don't know how you would teach that, because it's something that's innately human in our experience.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yes, lady in the centre there.
Sorry, coughing.
Hi there. Hello, close enough.
You're on.
So Francesca Lewis from Wonderman Thompson, WPP company, coming from an advertising background. Was a bit curious, you mentioned increasing education in schools. My question's about child cybersecurity. I read somewhere about Australia's government, for example, working with schools to increase kind of cybersecurity credentials almost, to kind of like heighten awareness about this. And what with Meta and TikTok coming under fire and having all these lawsuits to deal with, specifically, what do you see happening? I can err on the side of pessimism, so I'm curious to know what you see the future of cybersecurity for children, and especially with copper and the age of 13 being under dispute, curious about what the future holds. And thanks so much, this was such an entertaining talk.
Oh, well, glad. Can
She
I,
did say
can I be
entertaining
naughty?
and not educational.
Can I be naughty and jump in there? Because I do a lot of the child protection stuff, and one of the things that I get quite frustrated about is that we do a lot of what we call online safety, and it tends to be giving kids the skills to, it works fairly well, giving kids the skills to not be groomed by people who want to abuse them. Whereas if we were to give them security skills, whether that's online or offline, but if we give them cybersecurity, privacy, data protection skills, they can actually mitigate and be resilient to a ton of other threats as well. And, we can build in digital civility and all of that. So I would like to see a more comprehensive program that isn't, well, you're going off to code now in this lesson, and in this other lesson, we're going to terrify you about people who might want to harm you. What we actually need are people with critical thinking skills, and particularly with the work that I've done on the metaverse, where we're already in a position to deliver news content in immersive environments. People are going to need to be able to use their critical thinking skills and critical judgment more than ever. And technical fixes aren't going to fix all of that societal problem. So I think we need to start joining up some of those education programs so that we haven't just got the coders in one room and the terrified people who aren't going to, go out into the metaverse. We need to kind of give people the capability and the enfranchisement to get out there and take control of their interactions in connected spaces. But I'll let both of you talk as well.
I was actually going to agree with that and say actually that came up on the. I took advantage of being here to sit in a few sessions in the Global Leaders Summit yesterday about regulating the metaverse. They actually talking about the fact that as you go into the metaverse, the focus till now has been protecting children online, and actually now we need to look at protecting everyone online. Because there's a whole issue, and that I think that critical thinking education, we've got plenty of examples that go beyond children of harassment and misinformation and all that sort of thing. Those critical thinking digital skills, I think, is what we should be teaching, of which then cybersecurity and protecting yourself and how to control your personal data and privacy should all be part of it. So I absolutely agree,
I've sucked all the airtime on this one, but if you've got like 30 seconds of
Yeah,
wisdom
30
to contribute
quick
here.
seconds. So I think we almost have to go through another couple of cycles of like kids through school. So what was I? I was like with Gen X?
Gen
what?
X.
Am I Gen X? Are we Gen X? Gen X. I've forgotten that's how old I am. So I think we need to go
I'm
through...
XY.
Oh, shut up. Vic. We need to go through another couple of iterations of these generation pods of students in order for the concepts that are known by the adults to become effective teachers of the students, so that we're not just teaching them rote information that we have had ourselves to learn, if that makes sense. It has to become ingrained in us so that then we can help to teach the younger generations. I think that's the journey we're on right now. So I just recently did a talk actually for year 4 and year 5 students. Man, that was crazy. There's some crazy questions, those kids. Although the worst one, I kid you not, one kid goes, I hear something happened in 1999 to 2000. What was that all about? And I was like, what class are you in? What class is this kid in? I want this kid in my company. We're going to talk later, kid. But yeah, so there's a lot of learning to be done. I think we still got a few generations to go.
We've run out of time, and I never thought that I would close this session with the immortal words of Whitney Houston. But it does appear that we believe the children are our future. And that's actually quite a hopeful place to be, because we could have had a session, couldn't we, where the future of cyber threats were, you know, it really is going to be Terminator, the robots are coming, smoke and flames, etc., etc. So I hope we've left you for a good feeling to go home with, but that equally, it's as well to be prepared, because there will always be some people who want to harm other people and assets, and those people will always make full use of the technology available to them. Please don't have nightmares, and thank you very much indeed for your attendance. Cheers.